The moment Snowwill returned to the sky, every laugh at Asterian Beast Academy died. I remember the silence more vividly than the laughter, because only 20 minutes earlier, the entire flight yard had echoed with ridicule. Hundreds of cadets had crowded the observation decks, their clicking mandibles snapping with amusement, feathered wings rattling against folded uniforms, and harsh alien chuckles rolling through the air. It sounded less like a military academy, and more like spectators enjoying a public humiliation. Snowwill was the joke. The instructors had already written him off. The students whispered that he would never fly again. Some openly placed bets on how badly he would fail this time. Then everything changed. Without warning, the wounded sky beast spread its enormous wings. The creature hesitated for a single heartbeat, then launched itself into the air with a thunderous sweep that shook the entire flight yard. Dust exploded across the landing field as powerful wings caught the wind, carrying Snowwill higher and higher into the endless blue above. No one laughed. No one spoke. Hundreds of cadets stood frozen, staring upward in complete disbelief as the beast they had mocked soared effortlessly across the heavens. That was the day Asterian Beast Academy learned a lesson no classroom had ever taught. Never laugh at a creature that hasn't finished writing its story. Then the albino dragon rose above the launch platform, white scales catching the artificial sunlight like shattered glass, and every laugh died at the same time. She did not fly perfectly. That mattered. Her left wing shook. The support brace along her shoulder sparked once. Her first climb wobbled so badly that half the instructors reached for emergency controls. But she climbed 12 feet, 20 feet, 40 feet, high enough that her shadow slid over the cadet rows and covered every face that had called her useless. Down on the launch field, Jack Miller stood with grease on his sleeves, a wrench tucked through his belt, and the calm, tired smile of a man who had just gotten an old pickup truck to start on a freezing morning. He was not dressed like a beast rider. No polished armor, no ceremonial harness, no academy crest glowing on his chest, just a faded gray mechanic's jacket, heavy boots, work gloves shoved into one pocket, and a white streak of dragon frost across his left shoulder that he had not bothered to wipe off. I was standing 30 yards away with the rest of the advanced handling class, trying to understand how a human from Earth had done what our surgeons, trainers, engineers, and pride had failed to do for 2 full years. My name is Vera Soul, and before that morning, I believed humans were useful in the way maintenance drones were useful. Clever hands, strange ideas, too much confidence around dangerous equipment, good for fixing engines, sealing pressure leaks, and making small machines do things their manufacturers never intended. But dragons, no. Dragons were not machines. Skydrakes were living storms with bones, memory, and opinions. They chose riders the way lightning chooses a tree, and they rejected weakness faster than any instructor could file a report. Snowveil had rejected everyone, or maybe everyone had rejected her first. She circled once above the yard, low and uneven, but still airborne, her pale wings cutting through the academy dome's warm current. The warning sirens began to sound because the system had not approved her for flight. That was almost funny. After years of labeling her grounded, the academy was now upset that she disagreed. Jack looked up at her and gave one small nod like they had made a private deal, and she was keeping her end of it. Behind me, Cordalin, the handler, who had assigned Snow to him as a public insult, stopped smiling so completely that I heard his jaw plates click shut. Snowveil opened her wings wider, caught the air, and climbed another 10 feet. That was when I realized the joke had never been on the human. It had been on everyone who thought broken men finished. 20 minutes earlier, Jack Miller was still the funniest thing in the flight yard, at least according to everyone who had never fixed anything harder than their own reputation. The advanced handling class had gathered beneath the eastern dome, where warm artificial currents rolled over 6 launch platforms, and the Academy's best young riders showed off like they had been personally invented by the sky. Cordalin stood at the center of it all, tall, sharp-shouldered, and smiling, with every tooth his species considered polite to show in public. He loved ceremonies, especially the kind where someone else was embarrassed. Today, he announced, each cadet will be assigned a compatible skydrake for evaluation. The regular cadets stood straighter. Wing mounts shifted behind the gates, bright-scaled, broad-chested, restless, beautiful. Then Core looked at Jack. The human mechanic had been placed in our class as part of some cross-discipline exchange program that nobody understood, and everyone mocked. He was not a writer. He was not noble. He was not even academy-trained in beast language. He was just a man from Earth, with oil under his fingernails, a toolbox older than most student vehicles, and a habit of looking at expensive technology like it had personally disappointed him. Miller Core said, letting the name hang in the air, "Since you are so interested in repair work, we have found a suitable partner for you." The side gate opened. Not the polished gate where active skydrakes entered to cheers. The service gate, the one used for medical transfers, feed carts, and things the Academy preferred not to display. Snowwill stepped into the yard slowly. The laughter started before she reached the platform. She was larger than most training drakes, nearly 20 feet from nose to tail, with white scales so pale they almost glowed under the dome light. Her eyes were a soft silver blue, sharp but tired. Her right wing folded cleanly against her side. Her left hung lower, stiff along the outer joint, supported by an old medical strap that had yellowed with age. Every step looked measured, not weak exactly, but careful, like the ground had become an argument she was tired of having. Someone behind me whispered, "They gave him the grounded one." Another student added, "Perfect match." The yard laughed harder. Jack did not. He watched Snowwill come forward, and his expression did not change into anger or shame or panic. That annoyed people more than if he had shouted. Ko spread his hands theatrically. "A rare albino skydrake for our rare human specialist. Surely Earth engineering can handle one small inconvenience." Snowveil heard the laughter. Of course she did. Her head lowered half an inch, and the old strap across her wing creaked as her shoulder tightened. That was the first moment I felt uncomfortable. Not because of Jack, because of her. We were not laughing at a thing. We were laughing at someone who remembered flying. Jack stepped off the platform and walked toward her without asking permission. Core's smile sharpened. "Careful, human. She does not like being touched." Jack stopped 6 feet away, crouched slowly, and set his toolbox on the ground between them. Then he looked up at Snowveil, not at her damaged wing, not at the laughing class, but directly into her eyes. "Hey girl," he said softly. "Looks like they have been wasting both our time." Snowveil had not always been the Academy's joke. That was the part everyone liked to forget, because guilt is easier to manage when you call it tradition. 3 years before Jack Miller ever set foot in Iron Beast Academy, Snowwill had been one of the most watched young skydrakes in the Northern Dome. Even I had seen the old training footage. She was almost impossible to ignore. Most dragons flew with muscle and rhythm, beating the air into submission, until gravity filed a complaint. Snowveil moved like she had made a private arrangement with the wind. Her white wings caught thermals other drakes missed. Her turns were too clean, too smooth, too quiet. Instructors said she could read pressure changes through her scales before weather sensors detected them. Cadets whispered that she had stored blood somewhere in her line, the kind of old skydrake ancestrymies loved to advertise, but never fully understood. She was not the strongest. She was not the largest. She was better than that. She was graceful, and grace makes jealous creatures feel very small. Then came the ridge test. Nobody talked about it directly, not in front of instructors, and never near Snowveil. The official report called it a training misalignment, caused by unexpected crosswind activity. That phrase sat in the archive like a rug thrown over broken glass. What actually happened was simpler and uglier. A senior rider pushed her too hard during a high-current maneuver, ignored 3 warning signs, and treated hesitation like disobedience. Snowwill lost the rhythm of the lift, twisted wrong through the recovery, and came down hard enough to end her season. Not her life, not her spirit, just the part of her the Academy valued most. After that, the experts arrived in clean coats with smooth voices. Veterinary engineers scanned her. Wing specialists measured her. Bowframe consultants debated her like she was a design flaw. They adjusted straps, prescribed rest cycles, fitted braces that looked impressive and failed quietly. Every month brought a new theory. Nerve lock, joint weakness, flight trauma, structural instability, behavioral resistance. That last one became everyone's favorite because it blamed Snowveil for not healing on schedule. By the time our class saw her, she had become a lesson without being asked. Do not waste elite resources on damaged assets. Do not bond with unreliable beasts. Do not assign hope where efficiency has already said no. Jack Miller did not know any of that when he crouched 6 feet from her in the flighty yard. Or maybe he knew enough from one look. Mechanics have a way of reading history from scratches, loose bolts, bad repairs, and the silence around something nobody wants to fix. Snowveil lowered her head toward him, silver blue eyes narrow, breath misting, and pale clouds across the ground. The laughter faded just enough for us to hear the soft rattle in her old support strap. Jack heard it too. His eyes moved to the strap, then to the wing joint, then to the way her left shoulder held itself half an inch too high. He did not reach for her. He did not coo at her like she was a frightened pet. He just studied the problem like it deserved respect. Cordelan folded his arms. Well, human, are you going to repair a legend with a toolbox? Jack glanced back at him. No, he said. First, I am going to figure out who kept tightening the wrong strap. The yard went quiet. Snowwill did not move closer, but she stopped pulling away. For her, that was not trust. Not yet. But it was the first honest answer she had heard in years. Jack Miller's question landed harder than any insult Cord Dawn had planned. For a moment, the flight yard did not sound like a school at all. It sounded like a room full of people suddenly remembering they had left evidence on the table. Cor's smile held, but only because pride was doing emergency work behind his face. The strap was fitted by certified Skydrake specialist. He said, "You would not understand the complexity." Jack nodded once, like that was exactly the answer he expected from someone who had never fixed anything in a driveway at midnight with a flashlight in his teeth. Maybe, he said, but I understand pressure points, load paths, bad alignment, and what happens when somebody keeps treating a warning light like an attitude problem. Snowill's head tilted a fraction. Her silver blue eyes stayed on him. That was the strange thing about dragons. They did not understand every word, not the way Academy translators did, but they understood tone, attention, respect. Jack was not talking around her. He was talking about her like she was present, listening, and entitled to the truth. That made the class uncomfortable in a way laughter could not cover. Cor stepped closer, boots clicking against the launch field. This is an evaluation, Miller, not a repair bay. Your task is to demonstrate control. Jack looked at Snowville's left wing, then at the old medical strap crossing the joint too high, by maybe 2 inches. Control is what you use when you do not have trust. A few students muttered at that. In beast handling, trust was a slogan painted on banners, said during orientation, and mostly ignored when test scores were involved. Cor's crest darkened. Careful, human. Jack finally stood slow and calm, keeping his body turned sideways so Snowveil would not feel crowded. He was around 6 feet tall, broad enough to look useful near machinery, but nothing compared to the armored riders and heavy world cadets surrounding him. Still, the space around him had changed, not because he was physically imposing, because he had stopped accepting the Academy's version of reality. You gave me a dragon with a bad brace, a tired shoulder, and a crowd trained to laugh at her before she moves. Jack said, "That is not an evaluation. That is a setup." Nobody spoke. Even the active skydrakes behind the gates had gone still, their bright eyes fixed on the white dragon and the human beside her. Snowveil shifted her weight. The old strap creaked again. Jack heard it and looked back at her immediately. Not at Cor, not at the class. Her. "I know," he said quietly. "They have been asking the wrong question." Snowill's lips pulled back just enough to show pale teeth. Not a threat exactly. More like a warning that trust had limits, and patience had an expiration date. Jack accepted it. He crouched again, and opened his toolbox with deliberate care. No sudden movement, no reaching toward her wing. He laid out 3 items on the ground, a small flashlight, a soft measuring cord, and a flat metal gauge, worn smooth from years of use. Cor laughed too loud. "What is that supposed to do?" Jack picked up the measuring cord. "Listen." Another wave of laughter rose, but weaker this time. Snowveil took 1 step forward. Just one. Her claw touched the edge of the cord, pinning it to the ground. Jack froze, then smiled slightly. "Fair enough," he said. "You hold that end." And somehow, in front of the entire Academy, the broken albino dragon became his assistant before she became his patient. Snowell did not let Jack touch the wing at first. That was important, and it was the first thing the Academy failed to understand. Cordelan saw a delay. The instructors saw lost class time. The students saw another reason to smirk behind their hands. Jack saw a boundary. He sat on the warm launch field 6 feet from her left side with his tools arranged in a neat line, not moving closer, not pretending courage, not forcing some dramatic bonding moment for the crowd. He waited. The artificial wind currents rolled across the dome, carrying the smells of hot metal, engine oil, dragon feed, and the clean mineral scent of Snowveil's frost breath. Her silver blue eyes stayed fixed on him. Every few seconds, her left shoulder twitched against the old strap, and every time it did, Jack's gaze dropped to the same place, not with pity, but with calculation. "You are going to sit there all day?" Cor asked. Jack did not look back. "If that is what she needs," someone laughed. Snowill turned her head toward the sound, and a laugh snapped off like a switch. That was the thing about her. Grounded or not, she was still a skydrake. She still had 20 feet of muscle, white scales like moonlight armor, and enough presence to remind an entire class that broken wings did not make a dragon small. Jack reached into his toolbox and took out a small pressure gauge, then placed it on the ground between them. "I am not touching you," he said softly. "Just showing you." He pressed the gauge against his own wrist, then against the strap of his mechanic's bag, letting the needle jump where she could see it. Snowveil watched. Cor scoffed. "She is not a machine." Jack finally glanced over his shoulder. "Neither is a knee. Still has angles." That should have sounded ridiculous coming from him. It sounded like a law of nature. Snowveil lowered her nose toward the gauge. Her breath fogged the glass. Jack stayed still as stone. I realized then that he was not trying to dominate her. He was trying to become predictable. Predators respect strength, yes, but injured creatures respect consistency more. After a long moment, Snowill nudged the gauge with one claw, sliding it back toward him. Jack smiled a little. "All right, your turn to tell me where it hurts." He picked up the measuring cord, keeping his movement slow, and pointed toward the old strap crossing her shoulder. Snowville's throat rumbled low in warning. Half the class stepped back. Jack froze immediately, then lowered the cord. "Too fast," he said. "My fault. No excuse, no command, no offended pride, just correction." That was when Snowveil did something none of the handlers had managed in 2 years. She shifted her left wing a few inches outward. Not enough for flight, not enough for treatment, but enough to show the damaged alignment beneath the strap. The yard went silent. Jack leaned forward only with his eyes. "There you are," he whispered. "That is not a dead wing. That is a locked hinge." Corder's face tightened. "Impossible." The scans showed functional loss. Jack opened a flat metal gauge and measured the air beside the joint without touching her. "Your scans measured what she would not move," he said, "not what she could." Snowill's wing trembled once, but she did not pull it back. The white dragon had not trusted him yet, but she had corrected the record. Jack Miller did not call it a medical problem. That offended almost everyone with a license. He called it a load problem, which offended them more. "The wing is not failed," he said, crouched beside his toolbox while Snowill held herself perfectly still. "It is protecting itself." Cordelan made a sharp sound through his teeth. "You examined her for 3 minutes." Jack tapped the old strap with the back of his knuckle, not touching Snowveil, just the air near the buckle. "And whoever fitted this examined the equipment more than the dragon that silenced the nearest handlers." Mechanics have a cruel kind of honesty. They do not care how expensive a mistake was. They care that it is still attached to the problem. Jack pointed to the high shoulder line, the tight strap angle, the way Snowveil's left wing sat too close to her ribs. Every time she tries to open the wing, this brace pulls her forward instead of supporting the lift. Her body feels that locks the joint and says, "Absolutely not." You thought she was refusing to fly. She was refusing to fall wrong twice. Snowville's silver blue eyes narrowed, and her breath rolled across the ground in a pale mist. For the first time, I wondered if she understood more than we gave her credit for. Maybe not the words. Maybe the truth underneath them. One of the veterinary engineers pushed through the crowd, robes fluttering, face stiff with professional injury. That brace was calibrated by Academy standard. Jack looked at him. That is the problem. A few students gasped, like he had insulted someone's ancestor. Jack kept going, because humans from Earth apparently treat social danger as background noise. Standard works for standard wings. She does not have standard wings. Look at the span. Look at the joint rotation. Look at how the outer edge wants to roll before the inner lift catches. She is not built like the bronze ridge drakes you copied the brace from. The engineer opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Snowveil, as if seeing her shape for the first time in years. Jack reached into his bag and pulled out a folded grease-stained notebook. Not an academy tablet. Paper. Actual paper. He flipped it open to a page covered in sketches, arrows, measurements, and little notes written in blocky human handwriting. He had drawn her wing from 3 angles in less time than most students spent choosing lunch. Earth mechanics are different, he said. More to Snowil than to us. Where I come from, half the time you do not get the right part. You get what you have, what you can borrow, and what will hold until morning. He looked up at the flight yard, at the sleek launch platforms, polished equipment, hovering diagnostic drones, and instructors wrapped in authority. You all tried to make her fit the brace. I am going to make the brace fit her. Cord again. But it sounded lonely now. With what? Scrap metal and confidence. Jack smiled without humor. Mostly aluminum alloy, flexible tension cable, 2 pressure sensors, a vibration damper, and yes, a little confidence. Snowveil shifted her wing another inch outward. The old strap creaked like it knew its time was over. Jack held up both hands, waiting for her permission. The entire yard waited with him. Finally, Snowveil lowered her head until her pale snout hovered inches from his shoulder. She breathed once cold enough to frost the edge of his collar. Jack did not flinch. Then the dragon closed her eyes. Core stopped smiling. Jack reached for the buckle and said, "All right, girl, let us take off the part that was never listening to you." The Academy called the next 7 minutes unauthorized modification. Jack Miller called it work. There was a difference. And everyone in the flight yard felt it, even if they did not have the humility to admit it. The moment the old strap came loose, Snowill's entire body changed. Not dramatically, not like some miracle from a children's story. She simply exhaled long and low, and the tension along her left shoulder dropped by, maybe half an inch. Half an inch should not have made the yard go silent, but it did. For 2 years, the Academy had looked at that wing and seen failure. Jack removed one bad piece of hardware, and suddenly failure looked a lot like pain that had been mislabeled. He did not celebrate. He did not turn around and throw that fact into Coeur d'Alene's face, though several of us would have enjoyed that more than was academically appropriate. He just folded the old strap carefully, set it aside, and started building. Not with the clean elegance our engineers worshipped. With speed, instinct, and ugly practicality, he pulled a coil of flexible tension cable from his toolbox, then a lightweight alloy strip with drilled holes along its length, then 2 tiny pressure sensors he had apparently taken from a maintenance kit. "That is not certified flight equipment," Core said. Jack kept working. "Neither was your mistake. But it got 2 years of funding. A few students made choking sounds that were definitely not laughter, because nobody wanted Core to notice." Jack measured Snowveil's shoulder span again, then marked the alloy with a grease pencil. His hands moved fast but never rushed. That was the part one remember most. Every motion had a purpose. Clip, check, bend, test, adjust. He used the launch platform rail as a workbench, borrowed a heat clamp from a maintenance drone, and reshaped the brace curve by while muttering numbers under his breath, in inches and pounds like they were old friends. The veterinary engineer hovered nearby, horrified and fascinated. You cannot calculate live wing stress from visual approximation. Jack looked at Snowill's lifted wing, then at the engineer. Sure you can. You just have to be willing to be wrong and fix it fast. Snowill watched him the entire time. Her head stayed low, close enough that her breath left frost on his tools. Once the heat clamp sparked too loudly, and she jerked back. Jack stopped instantly, palms open. Easy, he said. Bad noise, not bad news. She stared at him for 3 heartbeats, then settled again. That was when something shifted in the crowd. We were no longer watching a human try to repair a dragon. We were watching a dragon decide whether the human had earned the right to continue. Jack fitted the new brace without forcing her wing into position. He built around where she could move, not where the chart said she should. The first cable ran from shoulder support to mid-wing, loose enough to breathe, tight enough to catch load. The second crossed lower, designed to take strain only when the wing opened past a certain angle. The pressure sensors blinked amber, then green. The vibration damper clicked into place with a soft, satisfying sound that made Jack smile for the first time, like he actually believed the thing might hold. Core folded his arms. It looks primitive. Jack tightened the final clamp. So does a hammer, until you need one. Snowveil extended her left wing. Slowly, carefully, the new brace flexed with her instead of against her. 1 and 3 in. Then the full span opened, pale and trembling under the dome. Light. No one laughed. Jack stepped back, grease on his hands and frost on his sleeve, and looked up at her. There she is, he said. Snowville raised her head, and for the first time that morning, she did not look grounded. She looked interrupted. The bond did not happen when Snowville opened her wing. That would have been too simple. And dragons do not give trust away because a tool clicks into place. She opened the wing because the brace finally allowed her to. She trusted Jack Miller because he did not celebrate like he owned the moment. He stepped back, that was all. He stepped back and let the entire flight yard see her standing there with both wings spread under the dome light, pale, unsteady, magnificent, and completely her own. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Even Cordalin seemed to understand that any joke made now would sound small enough to embarrass the speaker. Snowil turned her head, studying the new support along her left shoulder. The pressure sensors blinked green, with each careful flex. The tension cables moved with her muscles instead of dragging against them. The vibration damper gave a soft click every time her wing trembled, catching the shake before it could become a warning. Jack watched her the way mechanics watch an engine after a rebuild, not admiring his work, but listening for what still felt wrong. "Do not rush it," he said. "Just see what it gives you." Snowveil lowered the wing halfway, then raised it again, slower this time. The brace adjusted. Her claws dug into the launch field. Her breath came out in a cold white stream that rolled across Jack's boots. A student behind me whispered, "She is going to try." Core snapped. "She is not cleared for launch." Voil. Jack did not look at him. Nobody said launch. Snowveil heard something in his voice and turned those silver blue eyes on him. He raised both hands, empty palms forward. "Your call," he said. That was when I understood why the human was different. Every handler had asked Snow to prove she was useful. Every instructor had asked her to obey. Every specialist had asked her body to match a chart. Jack asked her what she was ready to give. It was such a small thing that it made the academy look cruel by comparison. Snowveil took one step toward him. The crowd tightened. Jack stayed where he was. She lowered her head until her snout hovered inches from his chest, close enough that frost gathered along the zipper of his gray jacket. He did not reach up. He did not pat her like a pet. He simply waited, breathing slow, eyes steady. Then Snowveil touched the side of her nose to his shoulder. Not hard, not dramatic. Just enough contact to mark a decision. Around us, the active skydrakes behind the gates began to stir. One of them gave a low call. Another answered. The sound moved through the yard like wind finding a canyon. Jack smiled, small and tired. "Yeah," he said softly. "I hear it too." Snowveil lifted her head and faced the nearest launch platform. Her left wing shook, but it did not fold. Core moved quickly then, because authority hates being left behind by truth. "Absolutely not. This animal is restricted. The human mechanic has no rider clearance, no flight authorization, and no right to move her onto that platform." Snowveil looked at him. Jack finally turned too. "She is not moving because I told her to," he said. "She is moving because you spent 2 years telling her she could not." The yard went quiet again. But this silence had changed shape. It was not pity anymore. It was anticipation. Snowveil stepped onto the platform one careful foot at a time. The system lights flickered yellow, confused by a grounded dragon entering an active launch zone. Jack walked beside her, not leading, not pulling, just matching her pace. When they reached the center, he checked the brace one last time, tightened the lower strap by a quarter inches, and stepped away. Snowveil looked at him as if asking for an order. Jack shook his head. "Not for them," he said. "For you." Snowveil stood on the launch platform while the academy tried to decide whether a miracle required paperwork. Yellow warning lights blinked around her claws. The platform sensors scanned her old injury, her new brace, Jack Miller's unauthorized adjustments, and probably the collective panic of every instructor within 50 yards. The system spoke in its smooth official voice. "Grounded Skydrake detected an active launch zone. Clearance denied. Please remove asset from platform." Snowveil ignored it. That alone felt historic. For 2 years, the academy had called her grounded, restricted, unstable, unfit for flight, and she had carried those words like extra weight on a wing already tired of carrying pain. Now she stood above us with the artificial wind rolling under her pale scales, and she looked less like an asset than a storm, remembering its name. Cordalin marched toward the platform controls. "Shut it down," he ordered. "Before the human gets her hurt again." Jack did not raise his voice. He did not even look angry. He just kept his eyes on Snowill's left wing, watching the brace flex in time with her breathing. "Do not shut it down," he said. Cor snapped. "You have no authority here." Jack finally looked at him. Neither did the people who gave up on her. That landed clean. No drama, no shouting, just truth dropped in the middle of the flight yard, where everyone had to step around it. Snowveil spread her wings. The right opened first, wide and steady. The left followed slower, trembling along the outer edge, brace cables tightening, sensors blinking from green to amber and back again. A murmur moved through the cadets'. I felt my own hands curl against my uniform. I wanted her to stop. I wanted her to try. I hated that both feelings could exist at once. Jack stepped closer to the platform, staying clear of her wings. "Easy, girl," he said. "First beat is just a question." Snowveil lowered her body. The platform vents pushed a warm current upward. She beat her wings once. Nothing happened except dust jumping from the platform and several students forgetting how to breathe. The second beat came harder. The brace clicked, caught, and held. Snowveil's claws scraped backward an inch. Cor made a triumphant little sound, as if failure had arrived right on schedule. Jack smiled. "There you go," he whispered. "Now ask again." The third beat changed the world. Snowveil rose. Not far, maybe 3 feet at first, just enough for daylight to appear beneath her claws, but that tiny gap might as well have been a mile. The entire yard went silent. Even the warning system paused, as if the machine needed a second to accept what its own sensors were reporting. Snowveil held there, shaking, wings working, white scales shining under the dome. Then she climbed 5T-1020. The brace sparked once and stabilized. Jack walked beneath her shadow, one hand lifted but not touching, ready without controlling. "That is it," he said, voice rough. "Now you remember," Snowveil answered with a clear ringing call that rolled across the academy roofs and brought every active skydrake behind the gates to attention. She banked left, awkward but real, then caught the dome current and lifted higher. Ko stood frozen beside the controls, his mouth open around an argument nobody wanted anymore. The academy system finally updated its display. Status revision, Snowveil, flight capable. I looked at Jack Miller, the human mechanic with grease on his sleeves and frost on his collar, and understood why Earth frightened the galaxy in ways our threat charts never captured. Humans did not just fix machines. They looked at broken things, ignored the laughter, and asked what they were before the world taught them to stop trying.